We're here, Dr. J. We're ready for you to take us into panel number 1.
All righty. Should I start now?
Please, yes.
Well, good morning, my brothers and my sisters all. I appreciate you and I appreciate you taking some time to be with us today to talk about the landscape of HSIs, looking at graduation rates and equity gaps. Let me say this before I begin. First of all, if y'all go onto our ethnic studies website, you will see that I've written about this, but the term Hispanic is like a made up term that some white person figured out, and it doesn't really speak to many of us. We need to deal with that at some point. Not right now, but I'm just putting it out there because, you know, it erases Latino, Chicano, indigenous, all the things that sit under that, Hispanic. So we really do need to take some time to deal with that. Now, let me secondly say thank you, Valerie, for not only putting this together, but also for being very, very, very nudgy about, you know, you got to do this. So I'm happy to be here. The latest census shows us that our country is increasingly diversifying. And as it diversifies and as we're counting our Chicano Latino brothers and sisters more clearly, and let's be clear, because we didn't always count them. I could tell y'all stories, but the people who know me say, don't tell stories because I go on tangents. But years ago, when I worked for the Council of Economic Advisors, years ago in the 70s, so yeah, I'm old, they had colored literally as one of their categories for economic data. And I'm like, excuse me, I think I was all of 23 and mad as hell anyway. I'm like, y'all got to fix this. So where we are now, looking at HSIs, is we got to fix this. We have to look at graduation rates, equity gaps, and the fact that if Latinos are almost 20% of the population, why are there not 20% of our college students? So this is kind of what we want to deal with today. So my job is not to talk. Octavio will be very surprised to know that my job is not to talk. My job is simply to introduce panelists, to keep them to time, and to bring our discussant in at the end. So I'm gonna tell panelists up front, you guys, y'all have 7 minutes. I will send you a time cue because we wanna make sure everybody has their time and that we have time for conversation, discussion, and questions. So I'm gonna start with Sasha Renée Pérez, the Senior Public Affairs Manager for the Campaign for College Opportunity. She is a CSU LA alum. We love that. We absolutely love that. She served as a Youth Leadership Senior Program Coordinator for the Pat Brown Institute right here on campus. And she managed our 4 youth programs. And Sasha, we're gonna start with you. Tell us what you have to say about the landscape systems in public HSIs. Sasha.
Hi, thank you so much, Julianne. Well, you know, over here at the Campaign for College Opportunity, we actually just finished up our report, State of Higher Education for Latinx, here in California. And what our report found is that you know, some good news, we have more Latinx students enrolling into our institutions and colleges more so than ever. And so that's really positive, right? We have more Latinx students seeking out a higher education. I think more of our families acknowledge and understand just how critical this is to our futures. But unfortunately, what we're not seeing is our Latinx students being supported to actually complete their college degree and to transfer. And, you know, our report found overwhelmingly that, you know, when we were looking at transfer admission rates for some of our students, our Latinx community college students, we are finding that there's really low percentages of those students that are being supported to transfer. And those percentages are even lower for our Latino students. And this is not just an issue within our community colleges, but also within our CSUs and also within our UCs. And so one of the things that we highlight in our report is, we do have Hispanic serving institutions. We have many. Cal State LA is one of them, and I'm a proud graduate of Cal State LA. But what we really talk about is having the state not just support students to be, our colleges and universities to be Hispanic serving institutions, but really supporting these institutions to be Hispanic graduating institutions, and making sure that our state and that the federal government is making real investments to ensure that our colleges and universities can provide our students with the resources that they need in order to complete their degree. And so we can see these HSIs begin to really be intentional about assisting these students in graduating and in transferring.
Thank you so much, Sasha. And you've raised some very important points, especially about graduation, especially about retention, transfer, and graduation. And I would add another thing to the table, which we don't have to discuss now, but I want to throw it out there, which is graduate school. What have we done to ensure that our students, no matter who they are, have graduate school opportunities? And I think that our Chicano Latino students especially are often sidelined here. I think that one of the other things that happens is that in first generation households, we don't necessarily understand the power of graduate school. I don't know if y'all know much about me, but you can Google me. But anyway, I am a former president of Bennett College for Women in Greensboro, North Carolina, which basically served a lot of first generation students. And what I found often was that parents didn't get the importance of graduate school. So if we want to populate the professoriate with Chicano Latino professors, we have to start at the community college, at the high school, and further. Sasha, do you have anything else to say before I move on?
No, I think just to your point about graduate school, and, I think that goes back again to providing our students, with that kind of information so that they understand the resources that are available to them, both financial aid options, opportunities for them to pursue their graduate degrees, opportunities for them to pursue doctoral degrees, and really understanding that pathway, right? I think especially for our first generation students, there might not be a lot of knowledge or necessarily understanding about what opportunities are available and what kind of aid is really on the table that they can take advantage of in order for them to further explore their education once they're done with their bachelor's degree.
Sasha, thank you so much. Thank you for your work, and you make us proud as a CSU LA alum. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Dr. Edward C. Bush, who has 25 years of experience in higher education, mostly serving the California community college system. He's known as a leader, among other things. His doctorate is in urban educational leadership from Claremont Graduate University. And I'd like to get his perspective. Brother, welcome. And please tell us what your thought is about the landscape of public HSIs, graduation and equity gaps.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to share my perspective, but most importantly, to be able to share the good work that we are doing at Cosumnes River College to eliminate the opportunity and obligation gaps that exist in our institution. And then also I want to say it's absolutely an honor, sort of surreal, to get introduced by you, Dr. Malveaux, and given all of your history and your work in higher education. So thank you for this. Then it's also a pleasure being with many folks from Cal State LA. My brother is the department chair of Pan-African Studies, and so there's a connection there to Cal State. So it's just great to be here. First thing I want to share, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to move through some PowerPoints very, very quickly within the 7 minutes. If not, just mute me, and I know my time is up, because I am passionate about this and the work that we are doing. And so the first thing is I really want to delve into some obvious tension points in terms of how our institutions exist. So I'm quite aware that we are a Hispanic serving institution. We are also a minority serving institution. and an Asian Pacific Islander serving institution. But the problem is that very much our institution is still centered around whiteness.
Yeah.
And so if we want to truly serve the needs of our Latinx students, then we must be engaged in the work of decentering whiteness. That means evaluate every aspect of our institution. You see the changed paradigm that exists in our college. We understand that to decenter whiteness is ongoing, consistent change and transformational work. And that you will see one of the principles is that we have to interrogate all practices. And so the lens of our interrogation is through a race conscious lens, that we understand that every decision that we make, every policy that we enact has winners and losers. And oftentimes we could draw that line based on how our students look. And so we have to seek to decolonize our practices from the curriculum to how we construct our buildings and to how we teach and what it is that we teach inside of the classroom. So our work to begin to turn around the trajectory of many of our Latinx students is not by focusing in on the Latinx students themselves, but it is to focus on those institutional barriers that exist, that is erected, that has made it very difficult for our Latinx students to complete. And so we are informed. We say that we at CRC, we do this work out loud, that we cannot solve a problem that we're unwilling to name. And so if we're talking about issues of race, we must say that we are specifically focusing in on the populations that we have traditionally not served well. Go to this next slide. So part of our work, we've been informed from a race conscious standpoint since my time at CRC. I'm going into my 7th year, but our equity work really crystallized after the murder of George Floyd. And we put together a very intentional focused effort, what we call the We Wont Fall campaign. What that means is that despite the dual pandemics that we were facing as an institution, we said we cannot afford to let up in our efforts to close opportunity and obligation gaps that exist for our Latinx and students and African-American students. So we had a plan that has 13 targets that specifically measures our level of success and the areas and the gaps that we want to close when a student first starts in the fall semester. So the fall has a double play, meaning that we will not let any students fail, but we always also recognizing that we're not going to do business as usual in the student's first semester. So we set out strategies, and the strategies that we look to create were strategies that touch what we call institutional sacred cows. These were challenging the basic assumptions of how our institutions existed. And so we did not want to leave anything uncovered. So we brought our faculty, our staff and administrative team together to talk about what are some of the practices that we need to change immediately that we know has existed systemically within our college that's made it difficult for us to successfully serve these students. So one of these things I'll point out is culturally relevant curriculum and curricular redesign. So we are engaged in efforts to decolonize our curriculum, for the curriculum gets reviewed by a curriculum committee to make sure that it's relevant to the students in which we're serving, really trying to bring this full circle to decenter whiteness and recentering the experience of our Latinx and African-American students. Similarly, you see that work within our efforts to equitize our syllabus. You see other strategy is around accountability. Whatever is important for an institution, they measure it, and there's a system of accountability. Oftentimes we talk about equity, we talk about closing gaps in achievement, but there's no structure or cadence of accountability in terms of how we do that. So our faculty is not evaluated through the lens, our administrators are not evaluated through that lens. We do not have to report out. I say this, there's never been a president in the history of community colleges that's ever been fired because they haven't closed gaps in equity. Right, so that means that the institution really hasn't valued closing gaps if there's no structure of accountability. And so that is one of the things that we're doing. And also we are the first district, Los Rios Community College District, which Cosumnes River is a part of, is to have an equity reflection as part of the 10-year faculty evaluation tool.
I like that.
We're doing some innovative work. We're one of few and the only California community college that has what we call as the opt-out schedule, which means that we are trying to eliminate the barriers from the very beginning our students have when they're onboarded into our institution. One of the things we do is that we're trying to make sure that there's a level of quality control in terms of our students' experience to eliminate bias. And so we found when students were getting advised and counseled, if they showed up brown, then there were certain assumptions that were made. They were made that they were incapable of taking rigorous courses in their first semester and incapable of handling full-time enrollment. And so what we did, we had implemented a quality control. Said if you're a first-time freshman, you're going to be in 15 units by default, and you're going to take college level, you're going to take English and math, preferably college level English and math in your first semester, if not completing college level English and math within your first year. So you will see if a student starts right, all the data shows that they're going to end right. So you will see with how we have increased the number of students who are taking 15 units. 15 units is magical. That means if you take 15 units in 2 years, for 4 semesters, you will graduate in 2 years, which you know now is an anomaly in community colleges for students to complete in 2 years. So you see how much we drastically increased that. But that's just the story. When you look at who has benefited the most, focus in our Latinx students. In the fall of 2015, only 8% of those students were taking 15 units in their first semester. In the fall of 19, that increased to 24%, the largest jump in any of our student populations. Then the same thing with completion rates. You see how drastic those numbers have shifted, but look at the numbers for our Latino students who was completing 15 units in their first semester, exponential growth, the highest growth among any of our subgroups. And the story that I'm trying to tell, even though the challenges seems big and sometimes insurmountable, because these numbers have existed historically in our institution, is not a problem that cannot be solved. We can pull institutional levers to change the trajectory for our students. The gap in achievement doesn't have to exist. And so you see first term English enrollment.
Brother Ed,
Yeah,
Brother Ed,
I know I'm
forgive
done.
me. You got a minute. You got a minute. I was
Okay,
giving
let
you
me
an
show you
extra
this.
minute because of your brother, but
Okay.
now you come to the end of your road.
I don't come this, but let me show you this. This is the beautiful thing, and I end on this next slide. Look at English enrollment and look at for college level English enrollment for our Latinx students. 50% of our incoming Latinx students are taking college level English in their first semester, but this is the magic. So you see 41% of those students are successfully completing college level English in their first year. Notice white students is at 39%, Latinx students at 41%. In less than 3 years, we eliminated the achievement gap in our college level English for our Latinx students, where they are outperforming their white student counterparts in this success measure. And I'm done with that. Thank you for the extra minute.
Brother Ed, thank you so very much. We're going to move on quickly to Cynthia Alvarez. She is Assistant Director of Student Success at Cal State University, the Office of the Chancellor. She is a first-generation college student, so I know she can really work with us on this issue. BA, Chicano Studies and Women's Studies, MA, Higher Ed, PhD, Higher Ed. Cynthia, you are a success story. Give us your perspective.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here as a proud first gen and Chicana former student. So I have my timer on and I'm ready to get started. So at the CSU, we've been working incredibly hard to support our Chicanx and Latinx students. 21 of our CSU campuses have achieved HSI status, and San Luis Obispo and Maritime are well on their way for that. Latinx students comprise almost half of the CSU student body, over 200,000 students, and this reflects a nearly 60% increase in just the last decade. For the academic year 2019-2020, the CSU awarded more than 44,000 bachelor's degrees to Latinx students, which is incredible, knowing that 62% of the total number of bachelor's degrees earned by Latinos in California are CSU degrees. So we're extremely, extremely proud of that. Now, thinking about our system-wide graduation rates, just revealed last month, we've learned that degree completion rates are at all-time highs for students from all backgrounds, right? Which is great news for the CSU system. And this year, again, we graduated approximately 25,000 more students than before our very ambitious graduation initiative 2025, which was launched just a few years ago. So specifically, now looking at the data around 4-year and 6-year graduation rates, here, let me speed up through this, but the 4-year graduation rate for first-year students system-wide, this is all students, is now 33%, which is the highest rate it has been in the history of the CSU, and just a few percentage points off from our goal that we want to reach in 2025. The 6-year graduation rate is now 63%, which continues to also exceed the national average for comprehensive 4-year public universities. And now looking at transfers, which are a very, very vital and important part of our student population, we see that our 2-year graduation rate has held steady at 44% and has actually just gotten to 1 point away or 1 point shy of our 2025 goal. And when we look at our transfer 4-year graduation goal, we see that the graduation rate is at 80%, which is another all-time high for us at the CSU. I feel like we can't talk about Latinx students without talking about intersectionalities and the different characteristics that are on our students, as well as their racial and ethnic identities. So just thinking about our system-wide graduation goals, but also our Pell Equity Gap goals, we see that our equity gap for Pell recipient students grew by 1% this year, which is not exactly good news for us, but we are working really hard to make sure that those equity gaps decrease in the coming years and get as close to possible as zero for us. For the URM, which we are working to get rid of that title, but our equity gap goal is 2.4 percentage points. So that has increased slightly as well. So we got our work cut out for us. Now, specific to Latinx students and their graduation rates, we know that Latinx students have historically experienced gaps in retention and degree completion. But again, our GI 2025 has focused on improving graduation rates and closing these equity gaps. Now, the 4-year graduation rates for Latinx students is currently at 26.4%, which is up from 14.4% 5 years ago. The 6-year graduation rate is also at 57.6%, which is up from 53.5% 5 years ago. So we have seen a bit of an improvement there. Very quickly, I want to go through a few examples of institutionalized efforts that are ongoing at the CSU to support Latinx students. We are very happy to have the CSUN Global HSI Equity Innovation Hub, which is meant to increase skill building for high demand careers in STEM. And we're also excited to share that the Innovation Hub at CSUN will work to transform HSIs throughout the CSU and nation to increase student success and equip Latinx and other historically underserved students with skills for high demand careers in STEM. So in addition to the significant financial support Apple is providing for the Global HSI Equity Hub programming, it will also provide innovative Apple technology, design support, and thoughtful partnership as the project expands. We're also very happy to share the success of Success, which was rolled out a few months ago at 8 campuses this fall and provided a bit of equipment and tech support for our students, for first-year students and transfer students. And up to date, the 8 participating campuses have distributed more than 22,700 iPad technology bundles, which have been extremely well received by our students. We plan to expand to 5 additional campuses in our phase 2, starting in the spring of 2022. And future phases could offer additional devices and be expanded to more campuses and more students. So we're very happy with that. And then our transfer pathways, we're always looking to create partnerships with the K-12 and community college systems to increase the number of transfer students. And so we right now are working to streamline these efforts and ensure that our students who are intending to transfer into the CSU have a much easier and clear pathway in getting to our institutions. And then just to close up real quick, I want to also share a bit of the recognition that the CSU has received for its efforts. Just announced the 2021 Seal of Excelencia was received by Fresno State, Cal State Fullerton, and San Diego State. We were also, 9 of our CSU campuses were named Fulbright HSI leaders this past fall. That included Chico, Dominguez Hills, Fullerton, Long Beach, Northridge, San Diego, and you see the rest of the list. And also, our unique combination of excellence and affordability has earned our campuses top rankings from national organizations for social mobility, best value, and best bang for the buck, as well as being a transformative college. And so 6 of our campuses have been named in the CollegeNet Social Mobility Index top 10. Very proud of that. Now going back to the equity gaps that we have seen being so stubborn.
Sister, you're out of time.
All right. There's an action plan. I'm happy to talk about it more over the chat, or you can go ahead and email me. Thank you.
What's the most important thing in the action plan that you'd like to lift up?
I would say the immediate system-wide enrollment campaign for students who have left our universities. We want to bring them back and make sure that if they're just a few units away of graduating, that they come back and get that degree and are able to move on with their careers and their educational journeys.
Absolutely, Cynthia. Thank you so much. You've given us a lot of data, a lot of information. We appreciate you. I'm going to move on to Claudia Martinez, who is the Executive Director for Education Programs, the Office of Diversity Engagement at the UC System, Office of the President. She's done just amazing work, especially around the California Subject Matter Project, and she's worked with K-12 educators. So Claudia, tell us what your thought is about our capacity, what we're doing as HSIs in public institutions. And you have 7 to 8 minutes. Are you there? Hello, hello.
There we go. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. I was just getting my PowerPoint queued up so that I can stay focused on all this information. And I know that there's been quite a bit of information this morning, so I'm going to try not to be as data heavy, but I did want to share some of the notable things that the University of California is doing as more of our campuses have become Hispanic serving institutions. So let me just go through some things pretty quickly so that we can also have any questions and answers and discussions at the end. And let me do this. Okay. So I wanted to provide some demographics and a little bit of an overview about UC and our efforts to become HSI. And because I'm not sure how many people are aware, excuse me, let me go backwards, are aware, sorry. I don't know how to go backwards. Sorry, I'm gonna go forward again. Okay, apologies for that. I'm not sure how many folks are aware of the work that we've been doing in this space. So as of 2020, the UC system-wide is 25% Chicano Latino in its undergraduate enrollment population. And so in many ways, what we have been doing is conceiving ourselves and thinking of ourselves as an HSI research university system, because we've reached that threshold, even though it's not an official title, but that's the way that we are trying to approach our thinking as a segment of higher education in the HSI space. So we experienced as an institution extraordinary growth in the Chicano Latino undergraduate student population over a 10-year period, about 129% between 2008 and 18. We currently have 5 campuses that are recognized as Hispanic serving institutions. And I have them here in order of when they were established as HSIs: Riverside, Merced, UC Santa Barbara in 2015, Santa Cruz, and Irvine. So you'll see that in the last few years that we've had quite a bit of activity as more of our campuses have become HSIs. We have 4 campuses that are emerging HSIs: Berkeley, Davis, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Those are all of our undergraduate campuses. And just this past year, our enrollment of Chicano Latino freshmen grew from 36 to 37%. So it's a pretty sizable increase in our undergraduate enrollment. However, as many of us know, equity gaps continue to persist in the representation of Chicano Latinos, particularly at the graduate and faculty levels. So this is an area that our Hispanic serving institutions initiative has really been focusing quite a bit on, which is trying to identify, and sorry, I have this, that piece of data is not there, but we're focusing on trying to address the pipeline gaps for graduate students and also ladder rank faculty. So sorry that slide went away, but Chicano Latinos represent only 10% of graduate students system-wide. Compare that again, system-wide with 25% at the undergraduate level. And Chicano Latino ladder rank faculty have been hovering around the single digits for a number of years. It's only grown from 3 to 4.9% across the system. Of course, there's variation in different fields. And the gaps in graduation rates between different ethnic and racial groups continue to persist. So there are a few initiatives that we've taken on system-wide throughout across all of the campuses to address some of these equity disparities. And one of which just was announced yesterday. You may have heard the elimination of the SAT, ACT requirement for admissions. UC is no longer requiring or even accepting test scores for admission. And this was, as I think most of us know, one of the biggest barriers to students becoming eligible for and accepted to a UC campus. So that was one of the pretty major milestone that had happened at the Regents meeting just this week. And they also decided that there would be no other test that would replace the SAT, ACT requirement, because that was something that was being looked at for the last few years. We've also been engaging in trying to make the UC system more affordable for students. And we've been part of an advocacy campaign to double the Pell Grant so that students had the Pell Grants had greater opportunity to support students' financial needs at the UC. And here, and this did not come out that great on the slideshow, but I just wanted to give you a sense of this is another kind of way to look at the disparities that we've experienced among UC CSU eligible, and why the SAT issue is so important is you can see that there has been a phenomenal, as we know, growth in the Chicano Latino high school graduates and among those who are graduates and those who are UC CSU eligible. And we've seen that over time, there has been an increase in eligibility for UC CSU, but it has not kept pace with the growth of the Latino population in California. So again, these are areas that our HSI initiatives have been trying to focus on at the undergraduate level, but we've really been trying to focus quite a bit at the faculty and graduate levels as well. So a little bit more explicitly, our equity and student success goals at UC that the Regents have adopted are what we call the UC 2030 goals. And these are goals that are focused on 3 key areas, in particular: degree attainment, undergraduate outcomes, and faculty growth. We are setting some numeric goals of producing 20% or 200,000 more undergraduate and graduate degrees by 2030, achieving a 90% graduation rate. The current graduation rate is around 84%, but again, achievement gaps in the graduation rates exist across different groups. And so if it's 84% for students across all groups. For Chicano Latinos, the graduation rate is 76%. So still high, but not as high as we would like it to be. And the other component is to invest in hiring more ladder rank faculty. I wanted to bring attention to our Growing Our Own initiative, which is the Graduate Enrollment Initiative, to increase the number and proportion of UC PhD students. We talked earlier about graduate student supports. This is an area that we are investing quite a bit in through a number of initiatives. We have established a UC-wide HSI initiative that is a professional learning community of scholars and administrative leaders across all of the undergraduate campuses to advance HSI and MSI related research and learning. And here are a few of our initiatives through and projects through the UC HSI initiative, Systemwide Initiative, which is the establishment of our advisory board, which has representation from all of the campuses. We launched a report in 2021 that provides a lot of the data and information better than what my earlier slides showed in that report. And I will put that link in the chat for that report where you can get more information. We're also sponsoring faculty research as well as apprenticeship programs in research for doctoral students to help them to complete their dissertations. And what's kind of unique about that apprenticeship program is that, which is going to launch in 2022, is that it's supporting graduate students who are have advanced to candidacy, but who are actually doing their research on HSI related issues. So it's very explicit and intentional in its connecting it with the goals of our HSI initiative.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to have to cut you off.
That's fine. I know it's a lot of information, but
I don't know how much time you had, but please share your deck with folks so that they can look at it. Very impressive. Again, very good information. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to move on because we have an hour and the hour is going away. Dr. Octavio Villalpando is kind of halfway my boss. He is actually the VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Cal State LA. He is the first VP for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and his job is kind of to sum up everything. He's our discussant, and so Octavio, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Malveaux. Very, very happy to be with you this morning. Buenos dias a todos. The other part of my job, by the way, that I think is worth mentioning is that I'm also Vice President for Student Affairs. So I hold both titles, which of course brings—
That's because you're greedy. That's because you're greedy.
which brings added responsibility to my position. So I also want to thank CLUA and the Consortium for organizing today's conversation, which is very, very important, certainly on our campus, but given the state of Latinx students in higher education in the state, it's a critical conversation to have. I'd like to also begin by reminding everybody on the Zoom that indeed Cal State LA was the first four-year institution in the state of California to earn an HSI designation from the federal government. And today it enrolls nearly 70% of our students who identify as Latinx. So this is a significant point, I think, for us as we talk about and contextualize HSIs and the landscape of HSIs, especially as we look into the future. Our campus is about to celebrate our 75th anniversary. And one of the constants that President Covino reminds us about is not so much celebrating what we've accomplished, but what are we going to do? Who are we going to be for the next 75 years? What have we learned, and where are we moving to as we become this new university effective this year? So let me begin by posing a couple of questions to hopefully guide some of the remaining conversation that we have during this hour. And I'll start by asking perhaps the obvious question. What does it really mean to be a federally designated HSI? Especially when we see Latinx students becoming a majority in public higher education in California, in Texas, and in many other states. Okay, what does it really mean then to become an HSI? And what does it mean to be an HSI when in fact, as was stated previously, HSIs graduate among the largest numbers of African American students, Indigenous students, and Pacific Islander students? So these are important questions for me because it's essential that we remember that unlike historically Black colleges and universities, HSIs were not given a charter by Congress, urging the institutions to embrace an education that reflects the histories, the realities, or even support the educational aspirations and support the educational aspirations of Black and African American college students. An HSI designation allows universities to apply, not to receive, but to apply for federal grants to enhance the success of Latinx students. There is no challenge to HSI institutions to, for example, promote a social cultural history of Latinx cultures or identities, or promote a particular graduation rate. It simply provides an opportunity to apply for grants. Now, this is important, of course, because it leads to the next question. What responsibilities then do HSIs have to serve Latinx students? I really appreciated Sasha Reyes's comments about having progressed through Hispanic enrolling institutions, Hispanic serving institutions, and now hopefully Hispanic graduating institutions. But at the end of the day, what responsibility is placed upon universities to meet a particular goal or emphasis of an HSI designation? Now, Francis Contreras and Estela Ben-Simon and others have reminded us that an HSI institution should incorporate a particular focus on Latinx students' education by creating non-deficit-based educational policies and practices, by hiring faculty, administrators, and staff who reflect the lived experiences and share histories with Latinx students, by ensuring Latinx students graduate with a grounded cultural sense of their identities and with the skills to recommit to contributing to their communities of origin. These are all wonderful guideposts for institutions, but there is absolutely no imperative coming from anywhere that requires institutions to meet these types of outcomes for Latinx students. Now, I don't mean to sound to suggest that this is a way for institutions to sort of shirk that responsibility. I'm simply saying that public higher education institutions are not challenged in the ways that HBCUs are, or even tribal colleges are, to provide a particular set of outcomes for Latinx students. So as we see the growing increases in the enrollment of Latinx students in public higher education, I want to leave that question to our panelists and to those of you that want to ask additional questions. I believe we have a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen that will allow for questions to be asked by Valerie and others. But again, what responsibility do institutions have once they achieve an HSI designation? So I'll stop here because I know that the conversation is much richer than hearing me talk about this. So thank you all for your presentations and for your time.
Octavio, thank you for your insight and for pulling some of this together, also for your history and your work. I think my role is just about over. I'm supposed to turn this over to Dr. Valerie Talavera-Bastos, who organized this, and I'm very grateful to her, not only for organizing it, but for encouraging me to be a part of it. Valerie, thank you Panelists, thank you, all of you. We appreciate you. And it's on you, Valerie.
Great. Thank you so much. This is an amazing panel. I am bombarded with good data and good research so we can move forward beyond words. So Victor Vallasca will provide some of the questions to the panelists.
Yes, thank you everyone for your presentation, for your data. And Dr. Octavio for summing it up. I guess I would ask the panelists to respond to Dr. Villalpando's question first, which is, what does it really mean to become an HSI? What responsibilities do HSI have to Latinx students?
Yeah, I could go. I mean, I think I really attempted to hit this in my opening around the idea of decentering whiteness and recentering the experience of Latinx students. To me, that's what it means to be a Hispanic serving institution, that your institution should not look the same in its practices as it looked when you didn't have a large number of Latinx students enrolled, that your institution should be transformed to meet the needs of the students in which you're serving. And so to be a Hispanic serving institution means to be a Hispanic centered institution in all aspects of how your institution operates and functions.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, I don't know why I just raised my hand. This is very, this is just what we do. I think when I think of HSI, being an HSI system, almost a full system of HSI designation institutions, I just always think about why those are there in the first place, right? We think about the history of the educational experience of Latino students, of Latino communities, and how we've been marginalized for so many decades and ignored by the system. And so I think an HSI designation is a great first step, but we need to come through with our efforts to ensure that our communities are receiving the full support, that our grant activities are really being geared towards servicing the support that students need, that we look at our practices and think about how we can be more innovative and work across silos to really serve our students, and especially with the very wide range of needs that our students have. So many of our CSU students are commuting students. They are parents. They have a variety of responsibilities that sometimes makes studying just, it's not so much a single focused thing, right? They're being pulled in so many directions. So I think as institutions, we have to think about how do we serve a student and a population of students that have needs beyond what we have served our historically traditional populations.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and add something to. I agree with everything that Dr. Bush and Dr. Alvarez have stated this morning. I also think it is grounded sort of in our mission. We haven't always done a good job of it, but I think if we were really true to our mission, different folks have different opinions about the master plan for higher education, but if you really think about what the vision of the master plan is, and around our land grant institutions, at least for the public higher education systems, ensuring that access and success for Latino students in California is sort of core. It has to be core, it has to be central. If it's not organic to what we're doing, then we're doing something wrong. And to the extent that we have external, incentives and imperatives, I think those are great and those are helpful. But I think if that's why we're doing things to serve our Latino students in California, we're not going to be that successful. If it's because we're doing it as in response to a mandate, I think it has to come from the institutions. We have to transform institutions from the inside out. And that's why we've tried to be intentional around our system-wide initiative to have that voice, to have those folks who have been in that space for a long time say our institutions need to be more responsive to our Latino students in California. If California is not going to be a successful state in many ways if the Chicano Latino population is not having access to a high quality education at all levels, all the way through doctoral education, faculty represented at all levels, higher ed administrators, et cetera. So until we're in those leadership spaces and really that in a way that reflect our population, we haven't become completely Hispanic serving, in my view.
I I agree with, I think, many of the things that have already been shared. And, like I mentioned before, I think we really need to focus on, shifting from just being Hispanic serving institutions to really being Hispanic graduating institutions, right? Most of California's public colleges and universities are HSIs. 21 of them are CSUs, 5 are UCs. And a ton of our community colleges as well predominantly serve Latino students. And so, really making sure that we're seeing our colleges and universities make an effort to implement reforms that are going to focus on student success, right? We've seen the CSU and the community college system put things forth like remedial education reform that is focused on improving placement of students into college level English and math, strengthening things like the CSU graduation initiative to focus on improving graduation rates and closing racial ethnic gaps for Latinx students. And so there's already a lot of really, great work happening. And I think we need to continue to build on that. And beyond that too, I think there really needs to be a focus on, diversifying our faculty, right? Making sure that we have more Latinx faculty in the classrooms so that students can really see themselves in these leadership positions. So I think this is, really comes down to being intentional with our policy making and being intentional with our work at many of our institutions.
I just real quick want to add also, I think it's also about being intentional. I think Cynthia mentioned it, but mentioned silos. We can't reach our goals and achieve what we want to as Hispanic serving institutions if we aren't working collaboratively and in partnership across segments, because there's so much opportunity to do that. And to create that pipeline that we need, we have to do that together. And so we're really interested, I know this for a fact, speaking for UC, we're really interested in partnering with our sister institutions to do that in very, very specific ways through our doctoral diversity initiative, through partnering with HSIs and other MSI institutions. So I think it's very specific initiatives that are going to get us there, and it requires us to work across the segments and across the systems of higher education and K-12.
Speaking of that, about working together, but also outside of California, is there any legislation, either statewide or federal, to specify, challenge, compel HSIs to better serve Latinx, Chicanx students, as Dr. Octavio mentioned?
I'm not aware of any legislation, but I did want to add a comment, and I was struggling to the extent I wanted to share this. I think as professionals, particularly academics and leaders of color, we need to interrogate how we have internalized and been conditioned to exist within these spaces. As I'm looking and hearing our responses, it really reflects that we have bought into westernized or very European-centered notions of even what success looks like for our students. So to merely talk about being a Hispanic serving institution, I'm using that term because that's a nomenclature, that's the designation. It's problematic and extremely limiting. We have to move beyond a conversation around producing more graduates to what type of Latinx graduates that we want to produce, what type of transfer students we want to produce. And do we want them to simply be conditioned in the same academies that has reproduced the racist structure and systems that we are currently living in? Or do we want to produce graduates that's in position to disrupt and dismantle structures that would produce the type of verdict that we saw today? And so we really want to be effective. We would change our notions and ideas of what success looks like instead of producing folks to just assimilate into white normative behavior, culture, and society, to truly educate and inform our Latinx graduates around their space, place within the structure, and their responsibility, knowledge, expertise, and competencies to create a new reality for their own communities, to truly build nations, to be sovereign, to not be dependent on other folks to clothe, to feed, and to educate. Those are the real conversations that we need to have as educators of color. And we don't disrupt this system by continuing the type of discourse that we are happening today. It simply is not enough.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the panelists for presenting here today. Very important information and very inspiring, might I say. Okay, so that'll wrap up panel number 1. Now, Valerie will come in and segue us into the next panel.